One, two, one, two. All right. What's up, everybody? This is Random Vinyl Archaeologist with a new show here on Twitch.tv called Real Talk. And this show will be just all about, keeping things 100%. Hold on, let me take off this volume here. So yeah, this show is all about just, keeping it real, keep it 100. We could talk about politics, hip hop, all types of things going on, trending topics. But the main objective of the show is really just keeping it 100, keeping it true. And so, yeah, I encourage people who are watching right now to go ahead and share this video. This week's topic is going to be about hip hop. Today is hip hop's birthday. It was founded by none other than the father of hip hop, DJ Kool Herc, and other forefathers such as Grandmaster Flash and Africa Bambaataa. So we're going to delve into that topic today with a special guest who is a hip-hop historian. He's also a journalist, a DJ, and he's been, he's held one of the oldest and largest hip-hop sites, which can be found at davyd.com. So spoiler alert, hint, hint. He's been featured on documentaries, magazines, newspapers, such as Rap City, CNN, Nightline, The Source, Vibe, Rolling Stone, The Guardian, and so many more. Tons of hip-hop documentaries. My man, DJ Davy D. What's up, Davy?
I'm good. Good to be on here with you, Ren. Good to see you.
Good to see you. Yeah, it was just a couple of weeks ago that we last talked at the when you hosted with me our weekly Sunday Who Sampled Hip Hop game.
Oh yeah, that was fun. That was very, very fun. You should have did one today.
Oh, right. I mean, today would be a good day.
This is the day where you can really dig into crates.
For real.
Break beats.
Totally. So first off, today is, like I mentioned, hip hop's birthday, and you and Jeff Chang are releasing a revised version of Jeff's first book, Can't Stop, Won't Stop: A History of the Hip Hop Generation, which has a foreword by the man himself, DJ Kool Herc. Right. Tell me how this came about.
Well, I mean, first of all, that was a landmark book that Jeff did,
mm-hmm.
and today it celebrates its 15th anniversary as well.
Dope.
About a year and a half ago, Jeff said the 15th anniversary is coming up,
mm-hmm.
and there were some things that weren't, included in the first book that they wanted to kind of do,
mm-hmm.
and he said, then it's also a different audience. And he said, we want to kind of recontextualize this book.
Mm-hmm.
And would you be a part of it? Would you be a co-author in that?
Dope.
So I said yes, and wow, that's a process.
Nice.
That is a process. I've written, obviously a lot, and I've been featured in books, and I've co-authored, but co-author meaning that I'm a contributor. Like mm-hmm. There's a book and you did a chapter.
Okay.
But to be nuts and bolts with somebody like Jeff, who's really a beast to this, it's a whole level of the game. I spent most of last year in cafes and just getting away and writing and researching and even though I know a lot, there are little things that you wanted to make sure you were correct on.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's an immense amount of history.
Mm-hmm.
There's, first of all, there's the history that plays out in the book, which made a success and a continued success. So that in itself is important. The looking at the political and social economic landscape in the Bronx in the 70s, what that was about, looking at those early pioneers and those early stories,
Mm-hmm.
from some of the people that he interviewed, many of them who are no longer with us,
Mm.
so like the co-founders of the Ghetto Brothers,
Mm-hmm.
Karate Charlie's gone, and Yellow Benji or Benji Martinez is gone.
Tell me about the
So
Ghetto Brothers.
huh?
Tell me about the Ghetto Brothers.
Well, the Ghetto Brothers was a gang that was in the Bronx, and they're at the precursor of hip hop. They're before hip hop shows up,
Mm-hmm.
and they were instrumental in terms of helping forge a truce and move things in another direction. We often talk about, oh, hip hop stopped the gangs. Well, if you take that sentence, which is now kind of cliche, you want to know, well, how exactly did that happen, and
Mm-hmm.
was there an immediate cause and effect?
Mm-hmm.
And so, hold on a second. And so you want to find out if there was an immediate cause and effect. And so when you looked at it, you found, oh, there was a peace treaty in 1971,
Mm.
and that there was a landscape that brought about gangs, and there was a politicization around those gangs, and there were Black Panthers and Young Lords that helped in that, and there were people that were really trying to find ways to change their material conditions,
Mm-hmm.
and so you know there's this fascinating story about how there was a truce that came about in 1971, which kind of lays the groundwork for people to go from neighborhood to neighborhood, which then, a couple of years after the truce, you have this thing called hip hop. And so the Ghetto Brothers were very instrumental because they were a large gang, they were a formidable foe, and they were political. They were very political. They were the ones that said, let's have not just a warlord, but a peace lord, somebody who would go out and spark peace. So it's all these different stories, and I don't want to get too bogged into it, but
Uh-huh. Well, my
but
question
to, but
is,
to make a story short,
mm-hmm.
um, one of the members went. His name was Cornell Benjamin or Black Benji. He went to intervene on what looked to be some sort of rumble, and he
Mm-hmm.
was killed
Mm.
in the process of doing that. And that's what was looking like it was going to set off a major war in the Bronx. And cooler heads prevailed, and the politics that they talked about had to be put into action. And so they wound up doing the peace treaty in December of 1971 at the Hoe Avenue Boys Club.
Mm. And this was documented in a film, right?
Well, there's a film called it's called oh gosh, Rubble. Why am I forgetting the name? It's gosh,
It has
it's
like
it's
street
Rubble
in it.
Kings. Rubble Kings. Thank you.
Oh,
It's
Rub.
Rubble
Okay.
King. Yeah. So Rubble Kings comes out, and so I think they pretty much capture that story. But Jeff really laid out a lot of that in his book,
Mm-hmm.
and so that was just extremely important, and it changed the traditional narrative um, at the time that he did that. That most people, when they wrote books, were talking about. So they would immediately start with the party in '73,
Yep.
and there was some, there were some accuracies, but there was also a lot of mythologies.
Okay. Can you break down
And
some
I
of those
think,
things?
well, I just think that one, there's a big, when you're younger, when you're older and you look back and you go between the 1973 and 1977, for example,
Mm-hmm.
that's a 4-year span. Um, when you're 40 and 50 and what have you, you look at that and be like, oh, that's just a blip in time. But when you're a teenager, right, there's a big difference between being 10 and 14 versus if you're an adult between somebody who's 44 and 49.
Okay.
There's a huge difference in your understanding of the world,
Mm-hmm.
how you see it, what your needs and wants are. And oftentimes when telling the story, you kind of mesh timelines. You say Kool Herc, Grandmaster Flash, Bambaataa, and they may have been 2 years apart when they kind of had their heydays. You mentioned a couple of people here and there. There's a big difference between what was going on in '75 and what was going on in '77.
Mm-hmm.
For example, because if you come into it, say you're 14, you have no idea what was going on in '75, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're 14 in '77, you
Mm-hmm.
see what I'm saying? And
Mm-hmm.
so you will miss in a lot of things
Mm-hmm.
unless you're able to go back and put those pieces together. And one of the things that becomes a challenge is that many people don't remember, or many people will exaggerate,
Uh-huh.
and so you have to do a lot of digging,
Uh-huh.
and you have to know where you can go to kind of get things verified, and that's always a fun process
Mm-hmm.
if you know.
Mm-hmm.
So like for me, I have folks that I came up with or that I know that have photographic memories and, are sharp on everything. So, Red Alert, for example, has a
Mm-hmm.
photographic memory
Mm.
like nobody's business.
Mm.
Chuck D has a photographic memory and remembers everything.
Mm.
Charlie Rock, who's the original Spade and Zulu, king, photographic memory and remembers those things. So, but you talk to somebody else, things become a blur. Just like now, if I say,
Sure.
what happened,
So vague
what,
recollections.
yeah, what happened in 2008 when Obama got elected? It's like 2008 kind of runs into 2009, runs into 2010, and, it all blurs. Or the
Mm-hmm.
Warriors, they went
Mm-hmm.
to the playoffs 5 years in a row.
Mm-hmm.
So if you go, well, what happened in 2016? Did they make the playoff? What happened? Did they win? It just comes a blur.
Uh-huh. Sure.
And so on one hand, and just making passing references, that's good. But when you got to tell a story,
Mm-hmm.
it may be important to know who
Or
was on the team in 2015, using the Warriors as an example, and
mm-hmm.
who was on in 2016, and who was on in 2017. Makes all the big difference in the world.
Sure.
Like,
And
like
when
for
you're trying
example,
to and when you're trying to document history, it's so important to get your
well, it's
because
it's is that, and then it's also a balance because you don't want to get bogged down into details that may or may not have importance.
mm-hmm.
So, for example, is it important in the evolution of hip hop to say that um, I played a breakbeat record that nobody had and nobody cared for and never really made it into anybody's playlist, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we could do a whole story about how I went to a store, found a breakbeat, nobody, and get bogged down versus telling the story about how and why breakbeats came about in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I hope that makes sense in terms of what I'm saying. So it's trying to get the essence and the spirit of what was going on at a time that involved hundreds and maybe thousands of people
Mm-hmm.
versus just one individual who might not have been as transformative as, say, somebody else. So me having a breakbeat record is not a transformative moment compared to, say, Grand Wizard Theodore, who invents the scratch.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, knowing about Pete DJ Jones and him providing mentorship to many early DJs or space for them to play is not as important as saying my cousin, who was also a DJ that time, who did clubs but didn't like hip hop and didn't even know what it was at the very same time that Pete DJ Jones was spinning. You see
Okay,
what I'm
now
saying?
what's the
So,
significance of Pete DJ Jones as somebody who like don't really hear that name? We mostly know Bam Flash Herc.
well, he was an older cat. He recently passed maybe about 4 or 5 years, maybe 3 or 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And he was known more for being a quote unquote disco DJ.
Okay.
But he was somebody who was very popular. And he also opened up doors for many people. So people like Flash would perform with him, Herc maybe performed with him. So he wasn't somebody who you would say was cutting break beats per se,
Mm-hmm.
but he was somebody who was transformative in terms of his presence and his open mindedness and his ability to connect with an audience that was hungry for something. In addition, somebody just told me today he played two copies of a record, not because he was trying to isolate break beats, but
Mm.
because he played 45s and was doing long sets and
Mm-hmm.
needed to extend it. So that become socially important, and the presence that they have become important. So I'm just using that
Mm-hmm.
as one example of many that you can
Mm-hmm.
pick from.
Was he also from the Bronx?
I believe so.
Because there's a
That's
lot
where
of
I'm.
there's some videos coming out on YouTube, about Bronxville or even Brooklyn having an influence on the culture pre
Well, all these
73,
all these all
74.
these places did, and the Bronxdale is what you're talking about.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Bronxdale was very important, and that's one narrative that kind of got left out of many people because that was the home of Disco King Mario.
Mm-hmm.
That was the home of, say, Andre Harrell, who recently passed and was there early on in the '70s.
Mm-hmm.
As an MC. That was the home to Paradise Gray from X Clan. That was the
Mm-hmm.
home to Larry Davis, who was a notorious guy who fought back against the police. Right?
Now is
Um,
Bronxville part of the Bronx?
Bronxdale
Bronxdale. I'm sorry.
housing projects. Yeah,
Oh, it's a housing project. Okay.
yeah. So, yeah, that was the number one chapter for the Black Spades.
Okay.
So, so of course that's an important thing to know. And people who live there, you know, have been like, we got a story to tell.
Mm-hmm.
So here's our story.
Mm.
And at the same time this is going on, you have Brooklyn, which is 4 million people deep, and its own situation that had things going on Eastern Parkway, that had a DJ culture that initially was centered around disco, and then also around reggae because it has a huge Caribbean population
Mm-hmm.
that also has a claim. And in fact they put out a whole thing called Founding Fathers because they were talking about their
Right.
sound systems and all that they felt existed at the same time as
Right.
things going on in the Bronx.
Yeah, and that
But
video is available on YouTube as well.
right, but the point that I'm getting at is that there's an essence and there's a spirit that you have to look at when you contextualize this and understand that at a particular point in time there were economic and political conditions that existed that impacted folks. And within that, there were ways in which people expressed themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And depending on where you were, it would have different names. So we eventually wound up calling this mode of expression, these dance and music expressions, hip hop. And it's something that people have built around.
Mm-hmm.
Were there similar things happening in other places? I guess if you go to, depending on where you go, you may find some similarities.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, in the Bay, there was a dance culture, and
Mm-hmm.
it was centered around funk.
Yep.
Today we put it
And that's
under the
Boogaloo, right?
umbrella of, yeah. Today we put it under the umbrella of hip hop, but it was its own thing,
Mm-hmm.
and it was its own thing for particular reasons. If you go to Houston, there was a dance culture there. There was a music culture there, right? If you go to Atlanta, every city has a story to tell, and so that's one aspect of
Mm-hmm.
it. Looking at that history, understanding what gave rise to it,
Mm-hmm.
respectively, and then why some of those histories were able to emerge and take the national stage and capture everybody's attention while others didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's something that you try to strike a balance in. It's something you try to understand deeper,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and you also don't want to try to fit pieces into a puzzle that just don't fit.
Uh-huh.
You know, um, for example, there may be a tendency to say, oh, what they did here on the West Coast, you know, obviously is connected to what we did in the East Coast. And from an East Coast perspective, that makes sense. But from a West Coast perspective, 3,000 miles away, they're very clear. We didn't know what you were doing. We didn't care. We had our own thing.
Uh-huh.
And we did it for this set of reasons that need to be explained and explored deeper.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's, and you find that in every city. Chicago has a rich scene and a rich history
Mm-hmm.
that has, some of it may have been influenced by something somebody saw and something somebody experienced, and some of it is completely homegrown,
Mm-hmm.
for the circumstances that they experience. Same thing with Boston. Same thing with Philly.
Like L.A. with Uncle Jam's army, I suppose is a good
Well, yeah, you have that. You know, you have the rich history with that Uncle Jam's Army and the funk scene that predates it and
Mm-hmm.
all that sort of stuff. But, you know, just to give you an example, if you listen to the music of, you know, Egyptian Lover, Great
Mm-hmm.
Broussard, shout out to him,
Mm-hmm.
you would listen to it and say, oh, this kind of has the same beat as Planet Rock,
Mm-hmm.
right? So therefore, Egypt, you know, heard Planet Rock and then decided to make music.
Mm-hmm.
But if you talk to him,
Mm-hmm.
he will be very clear. He says, no, I listened to Kraftwerk and I was influenced by Prince, which then inspired me to make the music that I make.
Uh-huh.
That's an important detail, right? That has nothing to do with the electro funk that came from Bambaataa and Soul Sonic Force. And so when you talk to Bam and them, he will say we were influenced by Kraftwerk.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We were influenced by James Brown. So you have somebody who looked at, you have two people on opposite sides of the country who looked at similar music.
Mm-hmm.
Both of them looked at Kraftwerk and came away with a different interpretation that inspired them to move music in a particular direction.
Mm-hmm.
That's important. If you go to Detroit and you talk to them, you will hear them say, we like Kraftwerk. And then they may say, we also might have got into little Herbie Hancock. So, you know, or what have you. So there's all these narratives and creation stories in every city.
Right.
But the one that we celebrate is, you know, the enduring one that comes out of the Bronx, which was a big bang in theory. And even if things overlap or some things came before or a little bit after,
Mm-hmm.
this is the one that most of us have reacted to. And no, you're doing a show not because of what happened in Tennessee, you know, not because of what went on in New Orleans. You're doing it because what happened August 11th, 1973,
Uh-huh.
you know, in the Bronx, 1520 Cedric Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
And so you build around that, and then you look at all the different branches that are connected to it, and you find and you appreciate all that all the narratives that have emerged.
Mm-hmm. Now you've been in the game for a long time. Like when was you? When are your first? What were your first memories of hip hop? You grew up in the Bronx, right?
Yeah. So the first
South
time I got
Bronx.
exposed was on the Circle Line, which is a boat that goes up the Hudson River in June of 1976.
Okay.
There was a song that came on called Jam on the Groove, and I saw a bunch of people, you know, drop to the ground and start, you know, spinning like a cork. They weren't on their back, they were just, you know, they were kind of up rocking or top rocking, as we might call it now.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't know what was going on. And all I knew is that whoever was playing the music kept playing it over and over again, kept playing this drum beat
Uh-huh.
over and over again. And when, you know, I asked somebody, he said, oh, they're breaking. That's what he called it. And that was my first introduction.
Okay.
Later, you know, I became a little bit more, you know, ingrained when there was a guy named Arnold who was from actually from that, you know, from that Bronxdale section
Uh-huh.
who, you know, lived in our neighborhood and came up and told us about Disco King Mario and Herc and everybody and talked about MCs. And that's what I got into first was being an MC.
Mm-hmm.
So my first rhymes probably had to be 77, 78.
Oh wow.
And, you know, and I've been with it all the time. I mean, I still have my rhyme book
Okay.
sitting right there.
I was
Yeah.
just about to ask you if you still remember
Yeah.
some of those
No,
rhymes.
I still have the rhyme book.
Nice.
And, you know, and it was basic. And my rhymes were actually built around a book from a guy by the name of H. Rap Brown, who was a member of SNCC and a former Black Panther, now a political prisoner known as Jamil Al-Alamin.
Mm-hmm.
And in his book, he has a bunch of rhymes, and he talks about when he was growing up, I want to say in Monroe, Louisiana, that him and his friends would stand around and they would play a game called The Dozens.
Mm-hmm.
And he put these rhymes in the book. The book was released in 1969.
Mm-hmm.
And, So I remember looking at those rhymes and then seeing, oh, he took some nursery school rhymes, you know. So let me add my own.
Mm-hmm.
So little boy blue, go blow your horn, summon up the people cause my shit is on.
Okay.
You know,
So taking those cadences and just
I'm the
flipping them.
chill out kid from 263rd, baddest MC that you ever heard.
Uh huh.
So you're taking those things and you're adding your own flavor, building around something that's already existed, and that's how I think many of us came up and built.
Mm-hmm.
Other people heard their older sisters doing double Dutch rhymes,
Mm-hmm.
or doing the engine number nine, or the Miss Mary Mac, all dressed in black, and we added our own flavors to it. Point being is that rhymes have always been in the community, right? It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't connected to this thing called hip hop, but people have always played verbal gang
Mm-hmm.
games,
Mm-hmm.
and it was always verbal jousting. And so, as this thing caught hold, I think all of us dipped into our memory or our family's memory, and and brought a little something to the party and added flavor to it.
Mm-hmm. Ali used to do. Muhammad Ali used to do that all the time.
Well, Ali, definitely. Ali, people who are old enough and could appreciate Ali's rhymes, float like a butterfly, sting like a bee, and he was doing all that. Sure, what it did was it kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? It just became one of the many sources that could be of inspiration for people who were coming out at that time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So if you were older, you were able to dig deep and go, oh, there was a record by Pigmeat Martin.
Uh
Here
huh.
comes the judge,
Mm-hmm.
right? Let
Now
me
that one
try and
really actually sounds like a rap,
yeah,
and that was like in
but
the '60s, right? Late '60s.
yeah. So some people would get into that, while others would be, man, that has nothing to do with what I'm doing. You
Mm-hmm.
see what
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying? So depending on who you talk to, depending on what their influence and what their motivation was. So remember, by the time I do it, people have been doing this for 5, 6, 7 years already.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not new to the game. I'm a second or third generation, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so there is a standard that's set. Oh, there's a cadence. The first cadence was more like radio guy. Hey, everybody, my name's Dave, and I'm here to rock and I'm here to save. By the time I come on, the cadence is yes, yes, y'all, to the beat, y'all, you don't stop. And, it's on the four, and you're just, rat a tat tat.
Mm.
So that cadence then dictates what you're going to be looking for. So if I'm looking at the H. Rap Brown rhymes in his book, Die Nigga Die, then I'm trying to see how those rhymes would fit this 4 count cadence,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
where somebody else might have said something very different. They would have listened to, the Last Poets, or they
Mm-hmm.
would have listened to Hustlers Convention, that album, and would have picked up flavor from that sort of way. And it all makes a difference depending on your age. If you were old enough to remember, then you would dip that way. If you were too young, you would be influenced by what older people were doing ahead of you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember that for me, my early, my early favorites were Curtis Blow, and then when Cool Mo D also kind of like, did something different with his cadence. When we talk about from the 80 to 85 range of hip hop legends,
Right.
for me Curtis Blow was the man, right? With the way his cadence was, and then Kool Moe Dee just took it to another place that inspired other people, other MCs like Rakim and
So this is the book, right? This is the book that influenced me.
okay, which one
H.
is
Rap
that?
Brown, Die
Okay,
Nigga Die,
there you go.
right? And inside, he has tons of rhymes. And, this is, of course, from the New York City Public Library, which I guess when I just never returned. But all his rhymes are here,
Nice.
right? And if you look at my rhyme book, which is hidden here, I don't pull it out too much. Um, you're looking at it and you're going, okay, let me add something to it. But let me give you an example of H. Rap Brown, right?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I heard this rhyme because I read it. I never heard it, but I read it. But then there was a movie called Five on the Black Hand Side.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look it up online, there's a guy called The Philosopher's Rap. and he comes in and he does the rhymes that are shown in his book,
Okay.
right? But the famous one is "I'm hemp the dimp, the women's pimp. Women fight for my delight," right? So remember that?
Uh
That's
huh.
Sugar Hill Gang.
Rapper's
But
delight.
in this original rhyme here, it goes, "I'm a bad motherfucker, rap the ripsaw, the devil's brother-in-law. I roam the world, I'm known to wander, and this 45 here is where I get my thunder." So, he goes on and on. So for
Mm-hmm.
me, when I was crafting rhymes, I'm looking at these and I'm like, okay, I could use this stanza
Uh
and
huh.
then
Uh
I
huh.
could add my own flavor, or I could use that cadence
Mm-hmm.
and get in.
That's
But
so interesting.
but was it a transformative moment in the evolution? No, because I wasn't, on the level of, the at that time it was the Furious Four. Wasn't even the Furious Five. I wasn't on the level of Fantastic or the Cold Crush, who really, had, were the forefathers for us. And but it was my flavor. I got my tapes and got my crew and
Mm-hmm.
got my stories to tell,
So
which
you
are
did
all
have a crew
important.
too. So you were the rapper and you
I
had a
was an
DJ.
MC. I
Uh
was
huh.
in a crew called TDK, Total
Okay.
Deaf Crew,
Uh huh.
out of Co-op City, Section 2. Shout out to Terai, Kara McQuinde, who came from what was known then as Rhodesia, now known as Zimbabwe. He was one of the dopest MCs and an incredible writer and a
Mm-hmm.
lead MC for our crew.
Nice.
And I was with another crew on the Marble Hill side of town called the Avengers.
Mm-hmm.
So shout out to Artie Art and to a guy named Jazzy J, not Zulu Nation Jazzy J, but Jazzy J from the Promenade.
Okay.
So those were that was where I hung
And when did you start DJing?
when I moved to Cali.
Okay. And you
So when
moved
I
to
came
Cali.
out
What year was
here,
this?
when I came out to Cali in the early '80s, I was still emceeing it, tapes and stuff like that showing that. But there was a guy by the name of Ben Gold who was DJing up at the campus, and I just kind of came up under
At UC
him
Berkeley.
at Berkeley. And what he was is that I would hang out, and he would let me MC at the end of the night.
Okay.
And he would put on a record like "Give It to Me, Baby" by Rick James, and I would just flow over it.
Mm-hmm.
And because I was always hanging out, then it became like, man, can I mix a record here and there? And that's how I got started DJing.
Okay. Interesting. So and when did your DJing start exactly? Because I'm trying to put the pieces together myself. Because there's, like you said, there's stuff going on in the West Coast at the same time. Stuff is going on the East Coast. Now I came into hip hop probably like '82. I was probably like in seventh grade.
Mm-hmm.
So this was already like, in terms of generations of, since hip hop started in 73, 74. Which one was 73, right?
73, 73.
There's a whole debate about that for a minute.
No, it's no debate. It's 73.
Okay. um, okay, so yeah, 73. I mean, that's 9 years later. I come into it, and you start DJing what year?
Well, I mean, by myself, professionally, probably would have been 84, 85,
Okay, and then when did you eventually get on radio?
86,
Okay,
86, 87.
and that was where? On
Calyx.
Calix? Okay,
Yeah.
and that's the Berkeley
So I
station.
came in through a guy named Natty Prep.
Mm-hmm.
That's the same person that brought Ricky Vincent, brought CJ Flash. We all came out of under Natty Prep's
Oh, wow.
umbrella.
Okay,
Yeah. And
that's
CJ
history right
Flash
there.
was more of an integral part of that show.
Mm.
And then Billy Jam was the one that let me substitute on his show, which gave me access to eventually became the springboard for me to get my own show,
Oh,
which I did in
wow.
'87, and
Nice.
the rest is history.
This is great history. You know what I mean? These are all those names that you mentioned are all like pioneers here, right here in the Bay Area. Billy Jam's done so much. And he's been recently re-releasing some of his interviews from the early '90s and stuff like that, and
Yeah.
it's just gold. It's
Yeah, and I
incredible.
think and it's all that history. I mean, Billy obviously has archives. Dave Paul has
Mm-hmm.
archives. KK Baby, and a lot of those guys, DJG and Garen, and probably Marcus Clemens and them got all archives. Kevy Kev,
Mm-hmm.
KVSU has archives.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we all been around doing this for a while. I obviously have huge archives. With I have almost every show I've ever did on tape,
Nice.
and I probably got almost every Bay Area um, artist there.
So, did was Kevy Kev DJing before you started DJing, or what's the lineage here?
Me and Kev went to the same school.
Oh, you
You
did.
know, yeah.
I
We
thought he
went
was
to
Stanford.
no. We went to the same high school. We're
Oh,
both from New
oh, oh,
York.
same high school. I forgot about
Yeah.
that. Okay.
But Kev was on the radio before me. Kevy Kev.
Same high school in the Bronx.
Yeah.
And then who moved out here first?
I moved out here first,
Okay, interesting. All right.
and so Kev did a show called The Drum
Mm-hmm.
on KVSU.
Mm-hmm.
So he was on before I was on radio,
Okay.
and was making headway. But it wasn't just Kev. It was a bunch of guys from New York. It was Kev. It was Rich D, um, Richard Dwyer. I want to say I think Thomas. There was a few other people. I'm going to remember everybody. And then before that, there was Jonathan.
Mm-hmm.
That was from the Bay that did the drum before Kev.
Oh,
But
okay.
Kev was a transformative figure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Sunday nights, 6 to 9
Mm-hmm.
was a big deal
And that was like the longest running hip
for a
hop
long time.
radio show for a long time. I don't know how many years he went for. At least a good 20, right?
More than that.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, he might have just recently stopped maybe a couple of years ago.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Forgive the vacuum in the background, but
I can't hear it. It's all good.
that's COVID life.
That's right. That's right. So okay, so you moved to the Bay, and so like your influence, I mean, is pretty huge in terms of like just letting people. Of course, also Billy Jam, Kevin, all these names that you mentioned. All your influences have been huge in terms of just hip hop in general, because you're also a journalist. You're nationwide. You know what I mean. You've written for just about every hip hop publication. Is that
I mean,
accurate?
but I was writing for myself first,
Mm-hmm.
and that's real important. And because I wrote for myself, then it opened doors for other people to pick up things that I was writing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It wasn't the other way around. I had no intention of trying to be a writer.
Mm.
It had more to do with I needed a clever way to advertise for my radio show.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of doing a flyer, why don't I give information about the show?
Mm-hmm.
Why don't I
Mm-hmm.
tell people that, oh, here's a playlist?
Mm-hmm.
If I would have thought about it, I would have brought out some of the old playlists that I have, so you would have seen it was called the David D. Deep Report.
Mm.
And then I want to say in about 88, right here where I'm sitting in this very spot, Kevy Kev, Marcus Clemens from KPOO, which is
Mm-hmm.
a station that we should never forget.
Mm-hmm.
That's Bay Area history.
Mm-hmm.
KK Baby. I think Benny may have been here.
Benny B.
I'm trying to remember who was at the meeting at my house, but we had a meeting at my house, and we formed, we formed the Bay Area Hip Hop Coalition. We kind of all came together and started putting out charts.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of just me putting out the chart, we combined our information, and we did the chart. And then we had like this thing called the circuit. So if you came to town, you came to us on Sunday mornings.
Mm-hmm.
Sunday morning show, Sunday morning crew, me, Siddiqui, Tamu, the late Nate Copeland,
Mm-hmm.
who was a stepfather to D Sharp, just so you know the
Oh.
connections.
Okay.
And
DJ D Sharp of the Golden State Warriors.
right, and then it was Jonathan Wafer, and so we would do Sunday morning, and then you went to KPOO in the afternoon, and they held it down from 12 to 6.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So with usually, Garen, KK Baby, Marcus Clemens, and it was later DJ Chill and KK. So, they was the juggernaut. And then from 6 to 9, you went to KVSU. So on Sundays, we used to all go on each other's shows half the time.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so we used to go on each other's shows. We'd hang out, and anybody who came to town, the rule was you do all three of the shows, or we don't mess with you.
Oh,
So we
okay.
came together like that. You service all of us records, or none of us will play it. So that's how that came about.
That is kind of crazy. That's a great concept. I mean, you
Yeah.
just consolidated all your power. Also, just you literally were like the gatekeepers.
It wasn't so much trying to be a gatekeeper as much as it was that labels were kind of coming in and overlooking. So they might come in and deal with one person and then not deal with anybody else. And
Mm-hmm.
so we were like, nah, you got to deal with us all. Eventually, Grand Diva and, Kim Collette and I forget the other person's name down in San Jose State. One. And they also had Ray Soldier and Quick, they were doing their own thing. They had a strip of time down there. They weren't really, with us in that meeting, but they're their own history itself. So there was a lot going on in
Yeah.
terms of people trying to do something, people trying to elevate,
Mm-hmm.
their platforms and do it in a way that made sense. I think the biggest thing that we did coming together was we did the NWA boycott.
Mm.
And that kind of put us on the map. And it came about because Kev came to the show,
Mm-hmm.
was like, how are you playing Malcolm X speeches and then playing NWA?
Mm.
And
Which show was this?
it was like, that's interesting thing. So we decided to hold 2 weeks worth of debates,
Uh huh.
and we
What year is
did.
this?
So yeah, we did 2 weeks worth of debates, and we said if the community thinks we shouldn't play them, we won't play them, and we'll just honor that. So
Mm-hmm.
that debate included Benny B,
Mm.
included the members of Digital Underground,
Mm-hmm.
Money B, Fuse, Sleuth Pro, they were all there. Nate, Cav, everybody.
What year is
And
this? 1988, 89?
88, 89.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, around that time. And we agreed that we weren't going to play it.
Mm.
And so we didn't for a good 2 years.
Mm.
And it wasn't as if we were arbitrarily. We actually had a sit down with Easy and Ice Cube about it.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, so we talked on the phone, and Easy he was kind of snarky about it. And he's like, "Well, why aren't you going to play our stuff?" And it's like I remember saying, "Easy," I said, "Man, we got instrumentals. We like your instrumentals."
Mm-hmm.
And but I said the lyrics is crazy, and he goes, "Well, damn it, I'll just send you instrumentals." And he hung up.
Uh huh.
And Cube stayed with me, stayed with us on the phone for a while, and talked about everything that he wanted to do as a member of NWA, but was outvoted.
Mm.
And eventually, the things that he talked about wanting to do at NWA showed up on America's Most Wanted. But we were always cool after that. I mean, I would see Easy, and he would always joke, "Man, did you get those instrumentals? Are you still not playing my stuff?" So it was never no crazy like, "Man, how dare you?" He just was like, "I hear you, but we're
Mm-hmm.
not changing up." And Cube, definitely when he left NWA and I ran into him, he was like, "Man, I got something big that's going to happen."
Mm.
And he was going with the Bomb Squad of Public Enemy,
Mm-hmm.
and
That's
then
huge.
told me about the album, and that's history there in itself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I can't even imagine. At the time, there was a split, right? There's two different, two different ways of thinking in terms of this. Like there's definitely some people who are. I mean, I think we're still like that today. You know what I mean? There's still people who are like we're purists, and I mean, we're not
Well,
all
the
about.
boycott got broken in this sense.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we felt that we had a platform, and our platform was rooted in culture as well as music, because that was the tradition of the Sunday show. And that if we had 15 songs to play, why should it include something that's degrading,
Uh huh.
degrading?
Uh huh.
Billy Jam, who, you know, is the reason why I was even able to get that show. It was one of the reasons I'm able to get the show. Felt that it was freedom of speech, and you shouldn't censor anything.
Mm-hmm.
So him and a guy named G Spot eventually got a show right after our Sunday show.
Is that Gary?
Yeah, Gary G
Mm-hmm.
Spot. And
Mm-hmm.
so the first thing they would do, we got off, they would play some NWA song. So that was their statement. Like, this is freedom of speech.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a philosophy in terms of that. And I mean, we debated today, people are doing it with the Cardi B and Meg the Stallion thing.
Mm-hmm.
Is it empowerment? Do they have a right to do what they're doing? Is it degrading? Is it holding things back? And so, depending on who you talk to, will determine the type of outlook folks have on it. You
Mm-hmm.
know, my thing was I wasn't into censorship, but I was into what we played on the air
Mm-hmm.
and why we did play it. But it wasn't like I wasn't a fan of what they did.
Mm-hmm.
You know, same way, like I don't have a problem with what Cardi and Meg did, do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I do know that there are forces that will push a particular narrative over another.
Mm-hmm.
And so before I get with them, I would talk to whoever promotes them,
Mm-hmm.
if
Mm-hmm.
that's my issue.
Yeah, I mean that's been a long thread. For the longest time, for the past how many years, people would always say, "What's the state of hip hop?" And the reason why is because there are, the corporations have been pushing this narrative for a long time, and we always have to ask that question
Right.
because of the state,
Yeah.
because of
No,
the
there's a lot going on there.
yeah. Let's go back to the book real quick. For those who don't know, we're talking to Davey D. He's a hip hop journalist, a historian. He's a DJ. He and Jeff Chang are re-releasing "Can't Stop, Won't Stop." It's coming out January.
Probably January or February.
It's going to be a re-release of the book, a revised version.
It was supposed to come out now. But
Okay.
this thing called the Corona,
Oh, what's that?
yeah, moved everything back, and et cetera, et cetera. And when you do books, it's it's a process.
Mm-hmm.
You got to go through a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
You got to fact check everything. You got to get everything lined up.
Yeah.
It's a whole thing onto itself.
It's a whole process.
And, yeah.
So, for those who are not familiar, talk to us about Jeff Chang.
So Jeff and I went to school. We went to Cal together.
Mm-hmm.
Jeff is, quiet as kept, long time with DJing himself.
Mm-hmm.
And was instrumental in being a part of that formation with the Quantum crew, Black Alicia's and all them
Mm-hmm.
up at Davis. But Jeff is a writer.
Mm-hmm.
He's a writer's writer, and he penned the book "Can't Stop, Won't Stop," which went on to win American Book Awards and was critically acclaimed. And then he wrote several other books right afterwards. Who We Be and All Right, It's Gonna Be All Right, and there was another one in between, the Aesthetics. I'm forgetting the other name. Hold on a second. I'm going to come back to it in a minute.
Uh-huh.
So I'm losing the thing. So he's long been writing, and is an incredible storyteller.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Really good at getting the narratives. So watching him work and seeing how he worked was just good, because I might come in with a bunch of facts. He was born here. He did that. He did the other, and it becomes very encyclopedic.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing you learn is like that may be good for something, but people want to hear a story.
Uh-huh. True.
So what's your story? And so I'd have to learn to contextualize it that way. and watching him break stuff down was masterful. That was a master at work.
Yeah, he does it very poetically.
And that's just on the writing tip. Jeff has done a lot of other things in political circles, and he's done a lot of firsts, and he's also opened doors. So for a lot of folks. So big shout out to him on that.
Yeah, it was really interesting when I first found out about how Jeff was, part of Quantum, which used to be a record label called Soul Sides.
Yeah.
And how he met all the guys from Black Alicious, DJ Shadow, Latif, Lyrics Born, and basically launched Soul Sides and all that. So he definitely goes back. And
he's not a rookie in this at all.
And his books are his Can't Stop Won't Stop is one of those top 5 books in terms of hip hop history. Can you name other books that you think are must reads or that you should have in your library for if you're a student of the culture? I know you're still teaching, right? Are you still teaching at State?
Yeah.
So what are your required readings for your students?
I mean, we teach out of Can't Stop Won't Stop. Marcelina Morgan's book is good. Tracy. Forgive me, I'm forgetting everybody's names. Wait. She's going to be like, how the hell did you forget?
I think I know who you're talking about. Let me look it up.
Yeah, I'll be bad with names. And now I'm drawing blank on the books. So hold on, I have all my books.
Yeah, just pull them out the case, the bookshelf. Some of the early ones that I when I started doing my research, because I was in college and I was writing stuff about hip hop as well and different critiques and whatnot. And one of the first ones that I got turned on to was by David Toop. He's probably the first one, right?
Yeah, David Toop is good.
Like his writings were a lot, they definitely gave a lot of history, but it was a little disjointed, but it definitely was the first.
Disjointed in what sense?
Well, I mean, when you just try to read it, he's just throwing out a lot of facts out there, but it's just like some of the stuff is just not as cohesive as it could have been written. I mean, I'm sure it's been revised a few times since.
Yeah. So okay, now I'm remembering stuff. So you have Dan Charnas's Big Payback, which is good.
Mm-hmm. That's about the music business, right?
Trisha Rose. That's who I was thinking. Trisha Rose.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You have Rakim Told Me, right? Sweat the Technique and all that. On the West Coast side, 6 in the Morning is a good one. Who's
that? Who writes that?
And I'm gonna be bad with the name because I'm obviously I contributed to that. You're catching me on times when I'm just bad.
It's all good. I'm the same way. Yeah. But I'm a stoner, so I have an excuse.
And then Ernie Panicoli's books are pretty good with photographs. So there's a lot. There's a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, some of my other favorites are early, like I said, probably late 90s. Vibe History of Hip Hop is a real good one.
It's a good one. Yeah, that's good.
Hip Hop America.
The book, that's good. Is the Divas of Hip Hop with Chris Varan is good.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a real good one. You gotta have me come back on when I can go through my books.
Yeah.
I'm kind of brain fried right now.
It's all good. It's all good, my man. I just appreciate you, coming in and for this interview, just last minute styly, since it's it's hip hop history. It's hip hop's birthday today. I figured, we would just, get you on right quick, and just talk about hip hop. Now, before you go, let's just talk about, you've been doing a lot of hip hop and politics for years. People know you as a journalist. Let's talk about stuff that's going on today. I mean, let's not delve too deep into it, but just like real quick, Nick Cannon is back in Kanye.
Is he really?
Yeah, apparently. And have you heard other reports, the new reports about Kanye and how these Republicans and Trump affiliated
Well,
operatives are getting him on the state
Kanye.
ballots?
Yeah. Well, just now, I just saw the flash. So it's Joe Biden and Kamala.
Is it?
Yeah. So it's going to be Kamala
That's it
Harris.
already? They named
Yeah.
it?
Yeah.
The announcement came
I
out?
would. Yeah. So that's going to be the ticket.
That's
Um,
interesting. Kamala's
you
got a
know,
lot of people are talking about, there's a lot of criticism about Kamala, and she was in San Francisco, the DA, right, at some point.
yeah, but the national critique of Kamala was different than the internal critique of Kamala.
Mm.
The national critique was that she's a DA, she's the police,
Mm-hmm.
she was locking up truants and all. And, we go back and we look at the election cycles that she ran through. There might have been four
Mm-hmm.
because she was the DA, she was attorney general twice, and then she was senator.
Mm-hmm.
You'd be hard pressed to see that become an issue in those elections. And that was here.
Mm-hmm.
The issue that people had with her most times is that she didn't weigh in on police brutality cases. She kind of was absent when Andy Lopez, the 13-year-old who was shot up in Santa Rosa, she was kind of absent on definitely absent on the Mario Wood situation,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that really was the major critique that folks had was
Mm-hmm.
like, yo, what are you
Mm-hmm.
gonna do? You're there. You need to go after the cops. The cops here were on her case because she wouldn't apply the death penalty to somebody who was accused of killing a cop. So
Mm.
so that was that. And I was kind of surprised when she went national that the first narrative that she wasn't really black, because she's, part Indian and her father's born in Jamaica. So you started
Hmm.
hearing that. And then you started to hear this thing about her being a cop, as if, we didn't have Amy Klobuchar and others who were prosecutors who were running as
Mm-hmm.
well. So I just
Mm-hmm.
thought that was an interesting narrative that
Mm-hmm.
got saddled on her. She should have been savvy enough to fight it and get rid of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, but, um, she didn't. But now she's going to be on the ticket for vice president. In terms of Nick Cannon and Kanye, their goal, well, definitely Kanye's goal, is to be a spoiler.
Mm-hmm.
And
I mean, he's pretty much said it. There was a
yeah,
recent Forbes
yeah,
article.
he wants to be a spoiler. And Trump, and first of all, in the elections, it's not the popular vote; it's state by state.
Mm-hmm.
And it's winner take all in each state. So you have six battleground states. Battleground state number one is Ohio. The other one is Pennsylvania. The other one is Michigan. The other one is North Carolina. The other one is Wisconsin. And the other one is Florida.
Mm-hmm.
Florida's a big mess.
Mm-hmm.
And North Carolina has been a mess. So it
Mm-hmm.
comes down to the four if you are looking to get rid of Trump. And so Ohio, as it stands now, what they're doing there, all the stuff that's happening, that guy still holds about 50%. So that's still a battleground. Michigan and Wisconsin, those are, Biden is ahead, but that can easily be narrowed.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can create enough chaos or plant seeds of discontent,
Mm-hmm.
hey, the Democrats aren't doing anything. They refuse to, prosecute cops. They don't want to defund. If you can keep raising those issues, which the Trump team is definitely doing, or at least they're giving platform to it,
Mm-hmm.
knowing that they're never going to do that. But if it can be enough for people to either sit out or to
Mm-hmm.
go the other way as a protest vote, then they can have something successful. And if you can use the celebrity of Kanye, and if Nick is going to campaign, then they can go all out and just talk crazy, like Joe Biden refuses to prosecute cops, and you can raise the narrative about Kamala as a prosecutor, and you can
Mm-hmm.
say that enough. If they don't have strong counters to that, then all it takes is 5%,
Mm-hmm.
to go elsewhere. So it's going to be a little bit closer than I think people anticipate. the X factor in this election would be the Brown vote and seeing where they go, because they're usually 70% Democrat and 30% conservative.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can flip those numbers, right, then that can be a big deal. Let's say you can make it 80-20,
Mm-hmm.
then
Mm-hmm.
whatever Kanye and others want to do ain't gonna make a difference. But they're gonna try and murky up the waters enough that people go, you know what, I'm not even gonna bother.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Or they'll plant seeds of discontent towards the Democrats, who are very cautious and
Mm-hmm.
who are, absent from so many of these struggles. And just Trump could become a protest vote.
Mm-hmm.
People can be like, I'm already miserable. I didn't get a stimulus check. I ain't getting no money. Y'all ain't talking to me. You know what? I'm going to vote for him just to show you.
Right, right. Well, there's also, at least from what I've seen in terms of hip hop, I mean, prior to this announcement of Kamala Harris becoming Biden's running mate, a bunch of people, a Pitchfork article came out where Puff Daddy, Diddy, Ty Dolla Sign, E40 signed an open letter calling on Joe Biden to choose a black woman as his running mate. So I'm glad that like hip hop is kind of like
Well,
come
he had no
together.
choice. He
Mm-hmm.
had no choice because of the movements that are going on. I mean, the letter, I'm sure the letter had some influence, but he had no choice.
Mm-hmm.
Considering the biggest movement right now is the Black Lives Matter movement, people out in the streets, police brutality, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think he ideally was going to pick Amy Klobuchar because she appeals to white suburban women in the Midwest,
Mm-hmm.
and that's where he needs to win. Kamala is cool. California is not going to turn red.
Mm-hmm.
New
Mm-hmm.
York is not going to turn red.
Mm-hmm.
And people often like to say, well, he won by 3 million votes. That's because in California, Hillary won by 4.5 million votes here.
Mm-hmm.
And she won in New York by 2 million, and she won in Illinois by 1.5 million. Right? That's where you get your numbers from.
Mm-hmm.
you know. So this ain't turning red anytime soon. So the question is, can she deliver in Ohio,
Mm-hmm.
in Pennsylvania, in
Mm-hmm.
Michigan, and in Wisconsin?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And in those places, each of those states are very different. They're not like the West Coast at all.
Mm-hmm.
And and you're just going to have a different steez and a different type of understanding. The same way if you went down south, you're going to have a different steez and understanding. So Georgia could be a battleground state, but is ripe with voter suppression.
Mm-hmm.
And Texas could too, believe it or not. But the voter suppression is real deep there. And so you don't have enough time to really unearth that.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're gonna have to play in these other arenas, and it's gonna be close. So
Mm-hmm.
where Kanye's at, he's trying to get on the ballot in those battleground states, specifically to be a spoiler.
Mm.
If
Mm-hmm.
Trump wins and people are upset and they're miserable and they're unhappy, he's going to smile, and it's going to be like his middle finger to everybody who he felt done him wrong.
Uh-huh.
That's what he's doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's what it definitely. I mean, he pretty much indicated it in his interview with Forbes. Well, and also in Kamala's defense, USA Today article came out. The title is "Public Defender." I worked with Kamala Harris. She was the most progressive DA in California.
I mean, that's all cool, but she let that narrative of her get out there
And that was by
in a
Nikki
way.
Solis.
Yeah. And the other thing I was going to say is they wanted Amy Klobuchar, but when the George Floyd thing popped up, it was kind of hard to justify that, because that cop that killed George Floyd had all these abuse charges on him. And
Mm-hmm.
guess who was the attorney general and district attorney at that time?
Mm-hmm.
Amy Klobuchar. So, that
Mm.
was going to be a haunting thing. Like, you let, this guy who killed somebody on camera get away. So
Mm.
she had to kind of bow out on that. They were going
Mm-hmm.
to come for her. And other cases that she just was kind of absent on, which is what the critique of Kamala was,
Mm-hmm.
that you're absent or around killer cops.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, but right now they're trying not to piss off the police.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he would have been better off, I think, picking Susan Rice because she doesn't have the baggage that
Mm.
Kamala does.
Mm-hmm.
It would have been hard. The only thing you could say, oh, she's a holdover from Clinton and Obama, but she doesn't have the same baggage. But we'll see.
Okay.
You got two
Um.
people with baggage. That's gonna. You got two people with baggage with going against a third guy with major baggage. So it's like, which baggage do you want the least?
Yeah.
Is what you're gonna, um, which baggage do you want to get rid of the most?
Yeah, and that's the state of our American democracy. For real.
You're
Um.
frozen.
Oh, Frozen. Hold
Yeah,
on.
now you're not
Okay.
frozen. Go ahead.
Okay, so my last questions. You are still a DJ. You're still putting out mixes. You are dope. A lot of people don't know. Do you have your Mixcloud is popping? How do you find what's your mixcloud.com slash? How do you what is it?
Mr. David D.
Mr. Davy D. Mr. Davy D.
Yeah. MR
Okay,
David
great.
D.
So check out Davy D's Mixcloud. He's still releasing all these quarantine mixes. They're dope. And on the DJ tip, you've also recently helped with a petition to help DJs live stream. Can you talk about that real quick?
Yeah, so myself, Alex Mejia, and DJ Platten were annoyed and concerned that when people were sheltered in, that a lot of people who were building community, because
Mm-hmm.
DJs build community,
Mm-hmm.
were being cut off. I mean, we love what D Nice did, we like what Questlove and others were doing,
Mm-hmm.
but there were people that's like, man, I want to have a Zoom party with my coworkers, like we
Mm-hmm.
did on Friday night, and Ren was the DJ for it. And Ren goes online and he plays, a couple of songs that everybody likes while you're sitting there, you know, enjoying each other's company via, live stream, and it would cut it off.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it was
I
like, why
hate
are you
that.
doing this? And we just felt that everybody else is making a sacrifice. Why can't you?
Mm-hmm.
This is, Facebook and Instagram, same company, and then, the record labels.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we hit up a lot of DJs and got maybe 10, 12,000 people signed.
Wow.
And, people were very concerned. And this pandemic is not going away anytime soon.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of, look what you're doing. This is all a result of that,
Right.
So,
Right.
so
I mean,
we
Twitch has
wanted to
been
make sure
popping.
that music, which is a communal thing,
Mm-hmm.
that has been commodified, and understandably so, you can make money, but it's still a communal thing.
Mm-hmm.
It should have been allowed to be embraced and presented to the community unimpeded.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately it was. So we we put the petition out. Big shout out to Sway. Sway's been he's given like a half hour of his show
Nice.
for people who have signed on to that petition
Dope.
to do guest mixes.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people have come on. You should probably do your 30-minute mixes as well,
Mm-hmm.
and get in there. But
I'm with it.
that's been pretty nice,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just reminding people that there is a healing aspect to the music.
Oh, absolutely.
There's a soundtracking of your life and the emotions you're experiencing that comes with the music. So
Yeah, I mean,
that's
definitely,
about.
it's definitely been keeping me sane. You know what I mean? I've only done a few. I do a one weekly live stream every Saturday from 3 to 5. But just watching everyone's live streams on Twitch, I've just like signed up to over 100 DJs locally and beyond. And there's a whole community over there embracing embracing the live streaming. The DJs are getting creative with their different layouts and the different shows that they're doing. It's beautiful. It really takes my mind away off. It's like a I go to Facebook, get mad, and I go to Twitch and get happy.
There you go. And that's what it's about. So we'll see what happens. They should change up. We'll keep you posted on that. But you can go to letthedjsplay.com to get all the information on it.
Okay, that's letthedjsplay.com. And then you also have tons of websites. The one I mentioned earlier, david.com, it used to be called Hip Hop and Politics.
No. So there's david.com.
Okay.
There's Hip Hop and Politics. And the main one right now for us is hardknockradio.org.
Okay, hardknockradio.org. Make sure you check out hardknockradio.org for Davey D's interviews. And also his Mixcloud is mixcloud.com/Mr. Davey D. Davey D, thank you again for spending the time with us, breaking down hip hop history from here in the Bay and beyond. You're definitely a treasure, I appreciate you, my man.
Thank you. You all have a good one and peace.